I think it might be good to just talk through, what are some common traps that people should be wary of in a bull cycle, whether it's, shitcoining or yield farming or trading. Or I'm curious to hear what would you say are the main traps that a listener should be wary of in the bull cycle?
I think the underlying theme, the thing that's most important, is the idea of the feeling you want to catch up. That causes all of these other problems. Like people, they get some Bitcoin and they're like, oh, well, there are all these other people who bought Bitcoin much earlier and they're up like 100% or 300% or whatever. How do I catch up to them? I can catch up if I get into a shitcoin which is going up 1,000%. Or I can do some yield farming strategy, or they just go out on the risk curve is what people do because they feel like they need to catch up, and they do the sort of high time preference thing, which is I'll do something which sounds really good, it's super risky, but it'll let me get to my goals much more quickly, rather than the hard responsible thing, which is get good money, save it diligently, DCA. All of those kind of things kind of are boring when you explain them to people. Um, so they just take on more risk than they should, and that manifests itself in lots of different ways. Shitcoining is probably the biggest one, and then doing these DeFi things and lending. Giving your Bitcoin away to these third-party custodians who have some strategy that they tell you is going to make you rich. All of these things are a bad idea.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Also, I think there might be an element to which people overpay in certain things. Like, as an example, what we traditionally see in the mining world is there's a sweet spot time to buy Bitcoin mining rigs, and usually that's in like the bottom of the bear cycle, right? Like late 2022, nobody wants to buy these Bitcoin mining rigs. There's a ton of them for sale. They're so cheap. That's like the sweet spot time to buy mining rigs. And then usually what happens in the bull run is hash price goes on a bull run as well, and so people end up really overpaying for the mining rigs. So I'm curious. If you have any thoughts on that, or whether you see that as kind of like a trap that people run into, or maybe even people trying to buy mining stock instead of buying Bitcoin, right? Like maybe that's another one that people can
Yeah,
fall
this is
into.
a great one because it takes me back a long time to before I knew about Bitcoin, when I was a gold bug. And I used to explain to people who were interested in gold, they would go down this mining rabbit hole as well. They'd be like, well, why don't I buy miners? They seem to go up faster than gold. And I said, well, there are all these other risks to mining. Gold mining in particular, there's geopolitical risks, there's management risk, there's, the financial risk of managing the gold and knowing when to sell it and when not to sell it. There are way more risks to mining than if you're bullish on the underlying commodity, just buy the underlying commodity. And that's the same for Bitcoin mining too. There are all kinds of risks, and Bitcoin mining, I think, is even more cutthroat than gold mining, because of the difficulty adjustment. Bitcoin as a system makes Bitcoin mining one of the most difficult um, competitive free markets out there. And the halving is, for most of us, it's an exciting event. For miners, it's a terrifying event. Imagine you're a miner and suddenly the amount of revenue you're getting gets cut in half every 4 years. And you need to be on top of your game in terms of costs, management, efficiency. All of these things have to be really nailed down. Otherwise, you're going to be killed because someone else is going to come along and do those things better than you. So I would say stay away from miners, and generally stay away from trading, trying to find the right price point. Some people get killed not through shitcoining, but by just trying to trade Bitcoin. Like, oh, it's gone up a certain amount, so I should sell out and wait till it goes down, and I'll buy back in and I'll have more Bitcoin that way. The problem with doing that is, first, the friction of taxation. If you live in a place where you get taxed for sales, the friction is so high, there's no way you can beat the system. There's just no way. It's too high. Even if you time it perfectly, you're not going to come out ahead. But even if you live in a area where you're not taxed, it is so hard to predict. And I've seen people who've sold their Bitcoin in anticipation it's going to drop to a certain level to buy back in, and it doesn't, and it goes on a run, and they feel so disappointed because they lost the opportunity of being in the market, as you said earlier on. being in the market during those few days when it went on a big run. So trading in and out, I think, is really dangerous. Using leverage is incredibly dangerous. There are so many people who have been blown out, who had like large Bitcoin positions and then just leveraged them, and because of that, they got margin called on a bad trade, and then they lost all of their Bitcoins. Um, the only thing that's really safe is to hodl. Just hodl and just survive. The game is survive as long as possible. It is so hard. There are so many temptations and so many people who say, "Ah, you can make a bit of money here, or you could do this strategy with Bitcoin, or there's this altcoin, or maybe try mining." All temptations that are trying to take your Bitcoin away from you. Get into a Zen state, put your Bitcoins in cold storage, and be patient, and you will be rewarded greatly. You'll be rewarded much more than 99.9% of traders who are trying to do this super smart strategy and beat Bitcoin. That's the dirty secret, is that people who do the simplest, dumbest, most boring thing beat almost everyone else.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way to put it. I guess one other point around dealing with corrections on the way up, right? And this is something we've seen in past cycles as well. Maybe it goes 20 or 30% dips, but it's still kind of on the way out. Do you have any tips for people to, let's say, not get shaken out?
I think just having a DCA mindset, it really helps a lot, because when you see dips and you're a person who DCAs, you actually get excited. You have a very different feeling to someone who's gone all in at some price, and is doing it as a trade. So if you have a DCA mindset, I think you're probably not going to be worried, and know that the cycle is probably going to end at some point. And if the amount of Bitcoin you're talking about isn't like going to change your life now, you just need to have patience. I think it will change your life eventually, and you just need to focus on getting as much as possible while the getting is good. And the getting is still good. We're still at such an early stage of adoption. Um, the gold became the global reserve currency in the 19th century, but this is like we're still in the Middle Ages for Bitcoin. There's still this like long runway of accumulation that needs to happen before Bitcoin becomes a reserve currency.
Yeah. And as we stand now, I mean, people throw around different numbers. This is like 100 million people or 200 million people, but this kind of counts, quote unquote, crypto and custodial accounts on various exchanges. If you had to kind of guess how many people actually hold a serious amount of Bitcoin on chain in their own hardware wallet or multi-sig, where do you think that kind of number is? Like, do you think that's kind of in the single digit millions, 10 million, 20 million? What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. My ballpark is somewhere between 5 and 20 million.
Yeah.
It depends on how you define what significant is, but it's still a minuscule fraction of the world's population.
Right. And that's, 5 to 20 million in a population of 8 billion people. And, not every millionaire can have one Bitcoin, right? So that just shows you just how scarce it really is. And so, things will really change very quickly once, the herd comes. And I think we're still before the real herd rushing moment.